Ah, shit. Get your tea and your popcorn because we have hit yet another psychological jackpot. Welcome back to the Creepy Articles series, and I have done some scouring on the internet because I'm just very curious to see who these beloved swirlers and divestors actually end up marrying. Because you know how they say that us exoticals are just jealous because unambiguous women are leveling up and they're getting chosen by these high value white men. You guys saw the video I made a few months ago where this unambiguous girl was saying that light skinned women in particular are jealous of her because she's being loved well by her white man. So I decided to go ahead and compile some photos of all of these unambiguous women and divestors being loved well. And I want to show you images of these actual men. And I just want you to ask yourself, is this who you aspire to marry? Does this man meet your internalized standard of your quote unquote dream guy? Like, is this who you really want to bend it over for and bust it open for? I've noticed there's kind of this theme where it's like, oh, all you have to do is just date this old, ugly ass, fat white guy, and then suddenly colorism goes away. So, because you've experienced isms in the black community, the solution is to just swirl. And you guys know me. Obviously, I'm not against swirling because that creates more mixed people. So, it builds our pedestal, it builds our population, it gives multicultural people more social power. So, swirling, you're never going to hear me say that people shouldn't swirl. But since this is only a conversation with us exoticals, I want to talk about this concept of dating a fat old white man as a way to solve colorism. So, they're saying that because they feel like if he looks like Santa Claus, he's going to be more grateful. A lot of them are taking the leftover incels from other races of people. So they're taking this gross white guy that nobody wanted in the white community, or they're taking this guy from the Indian community. He was like an incel or something like that. So they're chasing after these men, basically pedestalizing them, almost raising their market value. You know how they talk all that bullshit like, oh, this is your dating market value. Okay, well, anytime a woman puts a man on a pedestal simply because of him being non-black, she is contributing to raising that guy's market value. So they'll tell these women, oh, just go get a guy who's like old and ugly, and that's gonna even out the playing field. And it's like they don't realize that they're actually telling their own audience, basically, you're not worthy or you can't get a man that you're attracted to. And this is something else I don't like. I don't like how some people, they feel like you have to sacrifice sexual attraction in order to get someone. That's extremely male-centered to me. So you're devaluing women's sexuality. They're saying, oh, you just have to bend it over and bust it open for this ugly ass old man. And basically you have to do that because you're dark-skinned. You're dark-skinned, and so you can't get anybody that you're actually attracted to. Nobody attractive will like you. And so if you're dark, you have to go and get with this old, fat, ugly guy with like bad breath, yellow teeth. And a lot of times when you look at the swirling channels and stuff on TikTok, look at those men. Look at what they look like. Usually it's a bald, overweight white guy who literally resembles Santa Claus. And so if you're not attracted to the Santa Claus aesthetic, it's almost like they're telling you you have no choice. So because you're dark, nobody else is going to want you. And so that's why you have to go for someone who's as white as possible, who's old, because, the older he is, the more times he's been rejected. So it's actually a trauma bond. What they're doing is they're trying to brainwash dark-skinned women into trauma bonding with these rejects from other racial communities. And so I'm talking about this because I don't want the dark-skinned exoticals to fall for any of that rhetoric. Just because you're dark, it doesn't mean that now you don't get to enjoy sex. Now you have to sleep with, you're going to be relegated to being a concubine for an old white man. Isn't that messed up? It's like they're basically saying the best you can do if you're dark is to be a concubine to this older fat white man or an old Indian man or some old Asian man. And I'm not saying those guys can't be attractive, but it's like if you look at the examples that they give, look at the actual swirling YouTubers and stuff, look at those women's husbands. If you're not attracted to those guys' husbands, that's a sign that if you were to actually date that, you're not going to be sexually satisfied. And then some of them will say things like, oh, just get another guy on the side. Just sleep with another guy, have a different guy that you're sleeping with, and then have this other guy that like you're married to. And it's like, okay, I thought that you guys didn't like black women being stereotyped as hoes. I thought that you guys don't like the Jezebel stereotype. So some of them, they're trying to fight against isms, but then they're telling dark-skinned women to essentially be a Jezebel. And I actually was on a Reddit page today. It was like this interracial dating Reddit page. And on the page, there were white men talking about why they like black women. And a lot of these men were basically saying that they like dark-skinned black women because the dark-skinned black women are the most passionate about them. They're the most into them. Basically, they chase after them the most. And it's like, okay, so do you really want a guy where he's only with you because you chased after him so hard to the point where he's like, okay, cool, like I'm being put on a pedestal this much to the point where she's actually chasing me? Like, is that really what you want? And then another thing too, they stereotype. They're stereotyping older non-black men. They feel like that man will be more grateful because, you know, he's old, he's on his deathbed anyway. So the fact that he can get a young 35-year-old, he should be grateful for that. But at the same time, those creators and those commenters, some of them are actually socializing dark-skinned women to be a nurse. So they're basically saying you have to be a nurse wife to an old white man. You know, you have to nurse him to his death. You have to be kind of this caregiving wife. And that's the best you can do. That's the prize. So you have to sleep with a man that you're not even attracted to, and you also have to be his nurse. You have to be his caregiver. And so he's going to be grateful for that because he's old and washed up. He's only got a couple years left. So, you know, he's just going to be glad to have anybody by his side. And it's like, do you see the socialization that they're doing without realizing it? Because I don't see them giving the same talking point to light-skinned women. I don't see them giving the same talking point to white women. I don't see them telling Asian women, oh, well, just get a guy who's super old and white and fat, and then, you know, you'll be good. Because that's all you can get, basically, or that's the best you can do. I just don't like this mindset of the best you can do as a dark-skinned person is to get somebody who's as white as possible and as old as possible. And then hopefully you get somebody with some money. But remember the actual statistics on men. I just pulled it up today on ChatGPT, actually. It says that around 70% of men make less than 100K. So whoever their audience is, all these dark-skinned black women in their audience, 70% of those women are going to end up with a guy who makes less than 100K. 99% of individuals, both men and women, earn less than 200K per year, according to U.S. Census data. So there's a 99% chance that that old fat white guy that you're going on a date with makes less than 200K per year. And also, have you ever noticed that when they talk about like swirling, they talk about divesting, they call it opening your options, but it's really not opening options. It's really divestment. I've noticed that that's really just a nice way of saying you prefer non-black men. But it's like when it comes to these non-black men, they never actually show pictures of the types of non-black men they're attracting. And then the non-black men who do get shown on TikTok and stuff, notice how the women who are married to them, they never let him speak. So he never comes on there and says, hey, I am protecting and providing, you know, I make XYZ amount per year and I just purchased my girl a new house, or, you know, these are the types of gifts I give her. No, it's all based on an illusion. And then whenever they try to tell you what your standards should be, they can never name who this magical, mythical white man is. They can never name an example of a successful, quote unquote, swirling relationship with an older white man and like a younger, dark-skinned black woman. They never have any actual examples. And then if they do provide examples, it'll be examples of mixed race women like Jasmine Tooks and her husband. But it's like, okay, Jasmine Tooks is an actual model. So she's a working woman. She's not even like a trad wife. But another misconception is they will tell women to get with these old, ugly guys because they feel like, oh, he's less likely to cheat. He's more likely to treat you like a queen because he's ugly and you're pretty. And we all know over here in the exotical community that that's false. Unattractive men have some of the lowest self-esteem. I mean, first of all, men in general tend to have lower self-esteem than women, and this comes from lack of emotional intelligence. A lot of men are not even socialized to process their emotions. They're not socialized on how to self-soothe in the same way that women are. There's not as much of an emphasis on self-care in masculine spaces as there is in feminine spaces. So generally speaking, men already, right off the bat, have lower self-esteem than women on average. So even attractive men can have self-esteem issues. And so you're trying to convince me that suddenly an ugly man has such high self-esteem and high confidence and, he's going to be fun to be around. Because remember, people with low self-esteem, those people are more likely to be abusive. They're more likely to neg you. They're more likely to try to manipulate you or lie to you or like cheat on you because that person is seeking external validation. So that's another misconception. That's another reason why I laugh when people think that dating an old fat white man is the solution to colorism. And there's this other misconception where it's like, oh, he's going to be more financially stable because he's older. Nope, I just told you the stats. It said 99% of men are making less than 200K. It didn't say, oh, except for when he's above the age of 50, then he is making more. Oh, except for when he's above the age of 60, then he does make more. No, it says 99.7% of individuals across the board, both male and female, earn less than 200K per year. And another thing too, part of how I know that a lot of these women are speaking based on limerence, they're speaking based on fantasy because they're kind of like romanticizing older men as being these Prince Charmings. They're kind of romanticizing non-black men as being this Prince Charming. But in reality, any woman who has pretty privilege, like there are a lot of us over here in the exotical space who actually do date men who are like, they make 200K or whatever. We all know that any man who is a high level professional with a postgraduate degree, a lot of times that man is carrying a lot of debt. So doctors and stuff, and oftentimes if they're first starting out as a doctor, it's their first job, they just got done with their residency or whatever, or they just got their master's degree. They just got out of law school. Do you know how expensive those schools are? So a lot of those men that they're putting on a pedestal, like, oh, this man, he's an attorney. First of all, there's a difference between an attorney and a lawyer. Or they'll be like, oh, this guy, he's an athlete. He used to play for the NFL or he used to play basketball. And it's like, okay, once again, those people are on a salary. A lot of those people have way more debt because high income earners, oftentimes banks want to lend them more money because they're like, oh yeah, we definitely want to give you an unlimited credit card so you can owe us more money and then we can make interest on that money. So they're not telling you the cons of dealing with these guys. They're not telling you the reality of dealing with these men. Not to mention the fact that if a guy is that rich, let's say a guy is rich and maybe he's like attractive or something like that, a lot of those types of men want to live a bachelor lifestyle. So they're also stereotyping. They're projecting that these men, that they automatically just want to get married and, find a young, unambiguous black woman to wife up. And we all know that that's false. Not to mention the fact that studies show that a lot of women are actually suffering in these marriages. And then they're saying in my comment section, oh, well, all you have to do is just like not love him. Don't fall in love with him because he doesn't love you. And I'm like, okay, so you're willing to do all these things except for just decentering men. You're willing to jump through all these hoops. You're willing to be unloved. You're willing to like be cheated on, be abused, settle for a man who doesn't even have a lot of money, settle for an ugly man. You're willing to do all of that instead of simply decentering men. Yet I'm the extreme one because I think that women should just stop prioritizing romantic relationships as the pinnacle of success. So we are extreme for following this chart on the screen. And by the way, I believe that decentering men actually exists on a spectrum. So it's like, okay, decentering men is extreme, but sleeping with an old, ugly, fat man that you're not even attracted to, that's not extreme. That's actually a form of sexual trauma. So that's my issue with that talking point is they're basically saying, if you're dark, you have no choice but to experience this smexual trauma of sleeping with a man that you're physically repulsed by. And it's like, well, that's not fair. You're basically saying you don't care about those women enjoying their intimate lives. Why is it that you want to prioritize a man's intimate life? You prioritize that old fat white guy's intimate life because you're telling dark-skinned women that they have to choose these old white men. But then you're basically telling the women, oh, well, basically this is just a sacrifice you're going to have to make. This is just a barrier to entry. In order to be happy, you have to be smexually unfulfilled. Or you have to cheat or, maybe it goes against your morals. You have to cheat or you have to sneak around, you have to lie, because let's be honest, cheating is not just cheating. Oftentimes when people are cheating, they have to lie, they have to sneak around, they have to rearrange their schedules, they have to tell one guy one story, then they have to tell another guy another story. All of that is a form of cognitive dissonance. and it increases that woman's anxiety. So now they're admitting that not only do they not care about dark-skinned women's sexual fulfillment, but they also don't care about dark-skinned women's emotional state. Because they're saying you just have to go ahead and like be a sociopath. I would say that if a woman is just a sugar baby or something, okay, that's different. But a lot of the women who are watching these content creators, or they're watching the swirling and divesting stuff, a lot of those women, they're looking for love and romance. They're looking for fulfillment of their limerence. So limerence is like when you kind of obsess over a certain man, or you obsess over the idea of a man. So all these women, they've grown up watching TV shows like Grey's Anatomy or Scandal. They're obsessed with shows like Bridgerton. All of those shows are really catering to the femcel type of mindset. So they're taking these dark-skinned women who they view as femcells, and they're saying, oh, the solution to your problem is to just get a white incel. Just get the white version of yourself. So unattractive, undesirable in their own community, then you guys can come together. Like I've even seen some women say, oh, well, black, dark-skinned women should go with Asian men because both of them are like undesirable in their communities. It's like, wow, sis, not only are you dissing both of them, but you're saying that they should get together because it's a trauma bond. So do you see the toxic relationship dynamic I'm talking about? So decentering men is extreme, but being in a toxic trauma bond relationship, oh, that's not extreme. Oh, okay, so he's short and Asian, or he's like, he has certain features that are undesirable in the Asian community, and you have features that are undesirable in the black community. So you guys should just come together because both of you guys can relate to being ugly. So they're encouraging trauma bond relationships. And then they're saying that you should get with these older men because, you know, they're easier to control. Like, because he already knows he's ugly, so, you know, you're going to have more leverage over him. And I've heard some people say, oh, I don't date men who are light-skinned because the light-skinned men think they're better than me. It's like, okay, so you don't date light-skinned black men, for example, but you will date a white man who is even lighter than a light-skinned black man. Do you see the cognitive dissonance there? And I also hear them saying like, oh, a lot of older men, they're more mature. So you should date them because, you know, women mature faster than men. So you should just get a guy who's like 50 years older than you know, get a guy in his 70s. No, there are definitely men in their 70s and 60s who are still very immature. And I wanted to pull up this comment that I saw on an interracial dating Reddit thing. So the black woman, she asked like, hey, white men who prefer black women, why? So this guy says, white man here, currently dating a black woman who I may marry at some point. I've dated all races, but I'm really at a point in my life where I'm only interested in black women. I don't want to debate fetish versus preference, but definitely have a preference, and I know there are guys that have fetishes. Why do I prefer black women? Hopefully I can explain this, but I'm not sure how to put it in words. If a black woman expresses their love to you, they are a ride or die partner. So this man is admitting that he likes black women for the same reason that they say black men like black women. Because she's a ride or die, she's willing to deal with all your BS, she's willing to essentially be a doormat, potentially not be provided for and settle for less. And then this guy says, unfortunately, black women are labeled as angry or aggressive, but this is not true. Black women are assertive and direct because society has forced them to be, and those traits are what I find attractive. So this man is potentially a passive white man because he's saying, you know, I like the assertiveness and kind of the dominance of black women. And obviously that's a stereotype. That's a huge stereotype that a lot of black women don't like to have, which is the strong black woman trope. But here you are with a white man saying, you know, basically, I like black women because like they're strong, they're assertive, and they're ride or die. And then he says, as a white person, I didn't grow up in a world where my parents couldn't let me run around the neighborhood with toy guns playing army. As a white man, I didn't have to face daily discrimination coupled with sexism. In my opinion, black women have to overcome the most obstacles, and they are taught this at a young age. Life requires black women to create body armor that makes them driven and unfazed, which I admire and I'm attracted to. Okay, so once again, he's attracted to the strong black woman, but I thought that black women online are saying they don't want to have to be strong. They don't want to have to put on body armor. They want to be able to rest in their femininity, right? So this white man, he's essentially stereotyping black women as dominant, assertive, and being strong. and being ride or die. And he says that's why he prefers them. And then he says, when you gain a black woman's trust and she takes her armor off, you will experience, at least for me, a level of companionship and intimacy unmatched. So this man is conflating codependency with companionship and intimacy. So he's saying because they're ride or die, then, that's a deeper form of intimacy because she's willing to stay with me when I'm down and out, or, maybe she can even pick up some of the slack because she's the assertive, strong one, right? And then this guy ends it by saying, I hope this reads well. My reasoning is not a skin color thing or me looking at black women as objects. My preference is based on being attracted to certain characteristics I've only found in black women. Okay, but according to black women's talking points themselves, they say that a lot of those characteristics are based on trauma. Having to be strong all the time, the whole ride or die thing, feeling like they have to defend black men and all that those things are based on trauma. So this white man is basically saying, I'm attracted to the amount of traumas that black women have had to overcome. I admire those traits in them. I, as a privileged white man, I didn't have to experience that. And so I want a woman like that on my side. I want her to be fighting for me. And I find it interesting that they have no problem dating a white man with this view. But let's say it was like a black man with this view, then they would instantly see through it, right? They'd be like, wait a minute, no, I don't want to be your mommy. I don't want to be your social justice warrior. But now that a white man is saying the same thing, oh, it's totally fine. It's no big deal. And because some women are so obsessed with being a preference, it's almost like they don't care why they are preferred as long as they are preferred. It doesn't matter the reason why. So being preferred because you're strong, dominant, assertive, and ride or die, that's a good enough reason. And that's why I say that a lot of times they're going to end up in these relationships where they become a nurse or kind of like this caregiver wife to an older white man. So it's like it's still a form of labor. It's still a modern day form of slavery in a lot of cases. I just found another comment. This guy says, I grew up as a white man raised in a semi-conservative household, dating primarily white and Asian women. I dated and hooked up with a couple black women interspersed in my history until I found the one. She's a strong black woman with multiple degrees, including a JD. She's drop dead gorgeous, brilliant, and she challenges me like none ever did before. Okay, so this man, he's already admitting from the second sentence that he likes her because she is a strong black woman with more education than him, or with a lot of education, which means she's more likely to make money. So this man, he already sounds like, from the first sentence, like he's seeking after the ultimate 50-50 woman. And then he says, after years of submissive women, I found out that I prefer a challenge. I've been with her for over 11 years and married for a little over a year. Okay, so he's with her for 11 years and only just got married a year later. So he was with this black woman for a decade. And that's what they speak against on their channels. They're like, no, don't let a man just date you for an entire decade before he decides to put a ring on it or whatever. So this white man, he's literally bragging, saying, I've been with her for 11 years and married for a year. So basically, she was willing to wait around for 10 years to get married. And then he says, she's the best thing that ever happened to me and went a long way to make me the man I am today. Okay, so he's admitting that after being with her for a decade without marrying her, she still married him, and then she made him the man he is today. So this is the black wife effect that they talk about on TikTok. So he's saying that she built him up. So the whole Barbara the Builder thing. This man is admitting he liked his black woman because she's very educated. She stayed with him for over a decade without marriage or whatever. And then when he finally married her, she went a long way to build him up. Then he says, I've now bought her 2 houses and 3 cars, and I still feel in debt for what she brought into my life. So he's still admitting that even after purchasing her 2 houses and 3 cars, which he probably didn't because he just admitted that she built him up, he says he still feels in debt for what she brought to him. So he's implying that she still gave him even more than that. So he's admitting that this black woman has given him more than 2 houses and 3 cars. And then he says, it doesn't hurt that she is the first woman that could handle everything I have to give sexually, not to brag too much. She is literally the best thing that has ever happened to me. I've learned so much about the culture and what people of color have to deal with on a daily basis. I love that woman to the moon and back and beyond. I really don't know how I got so lucky. So a lot of times when a man says things like, oh, I'm so lucky to have her, I don't know why she chose me, usually that's kind of a red flag because he's basically admitting this woman is way out of my league. She's way smarter. She has more going for herself, but she still chose to be with me. So this man already sounds like he's basically riding her coattails. This white guy says, I'm a white dude and I've dated like 60% black women. I grew up in an area that was like on the cusp of becoming diverse, so I had a good number of friends of all different types, if that makes sense. Even today, I'm kind of a people's person despite being an introvert. I would say I have a preference for black women, but that's not really accurate. I seem to like dark hair, bright smiles, and some curves. I had a girlfriend say she thought white men who dated black women only wanted to date dark skinned black girls. She was such, because if they like light skinned girls, they would date a white woman. Surprise, I've dated light, dark, white, all skin tones. And this is exactly what a lot of swirling content creators don't tell them. It's like, okay, if that man really doesn't have a preference or whatever, he's most likely he would date somebody who looks like Beyonce. So I feel like sometimes women try to use interracial dating because they think that it will make MLS women jealous. Or they say things like, MLS men are attracted to me. And they're only saying that in the presence of MLS women. They're saying that because they think that's what we like. And so they want us to like be jealous or whatever. But this white man is saying, no, I date black women, but I've dated all shades. And so, generally speaking, if somebody is not a colorist or if they don't have a color preference, yeah, they are going to also date MLS women. But I think that for some women, they desire to feel special and they want to finally feel like the preference. So that's why they try to promote this talking point where it's like, no, usually white men who like black women, they prefer the darkest of the dark black women. And it's like, okay, then why did they create colorism? Why did they create racism and anti-blackness then? But what do you ladies think? Do you think that dating an old, ugly, non-black man is a way to solve colorism? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.